I am your humble artisan, and if you see fit to question me, then I shall answer. Right, so let's start with the last brokeronomics. Mason Royce asks me, I don't know, still feel like using a sledgehammer when a scalpel was required. Yeah, okay. I mean, it goes back to my earlier point that the US had been trying to use a scalpel, sending their little delegation teams off to the World Trade Organization for 30 years, and it got them nowhere. So, yes, I think the sledgehammer was absolutely required, and it has worked. If the scalpel approach worked, it would have worked before now. So I'm happy with that. I think he also said that domestic productivity needs to increase. Yes, it does, but I think that will be done through robotics and AI more than anything else. What else does he say? How is Ethiopia going to buy more American goods and even out its trade imbalance of coffee? Comparative advantage is still comparative advantage is still a thing, and in many cases it will just be worth paying the tariff. I mean, the tariffs will be a net revenue raiser. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that the point of putting a tariff on is to make sure that nobody ever pays it, because they immediately cease doing all trade in order to avoid 10% now. No, the point of putting a tariff on is that people actually pay it, and that at the margin, on the select things, that it gets imported, gets brought domestic. So no, they just pay the tariff. What else do you say? Many organisations are built factory in the US are reassessing the viability of their upcoming projects because the imported materials needed to build them about to go up. So how are they supposed to ensure? So there's another angle here that, if you are producing something externally at the moment, are you going to bring it onshore? Well, as soon as you get sufficient certainty around what's going to happen, and I think most people can take it as read that something like 10% is going to be the standard, except possibly on China. I don't think they're going to take China down to 10%, but we'll find out. Maybe that's the bottom for China as well. People are going to reassess that. If you're talking about the supply chain elements, again, I think you're just going to have to pay the tariff. I mean, I think your question there is more about the uncertainty of the fluctuations in the moves. And now maybe that it's sort of a blanket 10% apart from people who retaliated in China. That does provide the certainty. But you have to remember the input costs of whatever component. It is going to be a very small amount of the end product. So if you have to import widgets and whatever, let's say chemicals, let's say pharmaceuticals. There are a whole bunch of precursors that go into pharmaceuticals where producing them is labour, energy, and capex intensive. Very much so. So you need a large amount of capex to get the site up and running. I suppose you can do it through automation, or you can just do it through cheap labour. That's the other factor. And so somebody like China is doing a lot of that, and because the capex is so high, you probably wouldn't want to bring that on board. Right, but those precursors, even though they're essential, they're still a very small part of the end product. When you get to the cost of the end product, I gave this example last time, like the Madagascan vanilla pods. Don't think that because okay, so let's go with the current number: 10% tariff on a Madagascan vanilla pod. I went into Swindon town today and I bought a Madagascan vanilla donut. I was hoping to see the chap who was a gold tier subscriber, but he wasn't there. The other guy was there, and I bought this donut. What did it cost me? £3 or something. Because the vanilla Madagascan vanilla pod has gone up by 10%, it's not going to cost me £3.30 next time to buy that donut, because the vanilla pod was a tiny input cost into the donut. Actually, what's the biggest input cost? Well, it's the cost of the chap stood there at the stall. It's the cost of the chap who made the donut in the first place. It's the cost of the box. It's the cost of diesel for running their van around and all that kind of stuff. It's the markup on the vanilla pod after it got shipped into the country. So, you can put 10% on those vanilla pods, and I seriously doubt it's going to knock the margins out on that lovely, lovely donut that I had. If you're the gold tier chap who made it, good donut. Right. Let's finish Mr. Royce. He's got quite a long comment, hasn't he? This feels like a very unsophisticated and risky response to complex problems that backfire spectacularly and hand power straight back to the Democrats in the midterm. No, I disagree with the last bit there, because, I just miss the idea that the political pain from this, that, all the reeing and screeching that we've had over the past week is going to stay there. I mean, the total amount of reeing and screeching will still be there, but it will jump around for whatever the issue is next week or the week after that. The reeing machine is going to be there. But put it this way, the underlying fundamentals influence the narrative ultimately. The narrative does not affect the underlying fundamentals. And the underlying fundamentals are going to improve by the midterms. The business cycle will have turned, as I keep saying, it's going to be fine. So, a big brouhaha for a week over this is not something you need to worry about come the midterms. In terms of it being unsophisticated, well, again, that's back to the sledgehammer versus the scalpel thing. The scalpel didn't work, hasn't worked for 30 years. This has. So, good old Donald. Roman Observer says, meh, still no Disney-nomics. Yes. I would love to do a Brokenomics on the Disney business model. The moment that I can figure out what the Disney business model is. So, I mean, off the top of my head, Disney profits are probably around 5 billion. I vaguely remember that from whenever it is I looked at it. The loss from Snow White is what, 300-400 billion. The profit from Disney is about 4-5 trillion, and the loss of Snow White is 300 or 400 billion. Right, so it's quite meaningful, whatever that is, like 8% or something. Why did Disney do this? Why do they keep putting out really bad woke films? And as soon as I can figure that out, I'm going to do a Brokenomics on it and tell you, but I am not there yet. Fuzzy Pirate says, is it possible the strategic Bitcoin reserve and potential re-evaluation of gold has been put in place as a safety net, and how would that work? I think there should be a re-evaluation of gold. I don't know if there will be. And the Bitcoin reserve, it hasn't been put in place because of this. It has been put in place as a potential safety net, but not because of this policy. But kind of agree there. Some other comments that got captured. This might have been from the live chat. They're not attributed, but my people are pointing out that gold has done very well over this period. Longer term, gold has basically preserved purchasing power against the redenomination of fiat currencies. If you want to clip a short time frame, then you can make it look like gold has done very well, and because it doesn't go in a straight line, it bobs, and sometimes it takes a while to catch up and stuff like that. But over the longer term, gold is, if you want to play gold short term, you want to make a play over a year or so. But if you want a long term alpha, I like gold. I own gold. I just don't think the long term alpha is there. Apparently, there was loads of comments about the Chinese being able to order people around. So the idea being is that in any confrontation between China and the US, the China is in the dominant position because they're not a democracy. They can just say to their people, do this, do that, and they don't have to worry about their people. Right, that is, I have to say, to any of you making those comments, bonkers, because the absolute last thing that the Chinese leadership need is hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of unemployed, angry men streaming out of those southern factories back into the northern cities. Last thing they need. Tiananmen Square wasn't that long ago, was it? It's 40 years ago now. But when people get a bit antsy in China, that's not the situation that the Chinese leadership wants at all. At all. They are in a dominant position until things get really hairy. And they are dictators. They don't want to mess with that at all. So this idea that China can just endure infinity pain in a trade war with the US, not my takeaway at all. Not my takeaway at all. Well, loads of people asked a variation of why did Trump crash the bond market, and other commentators have been making this comment as well. So the tranche of debt that they got away yesterday was at 4.34%, I think. 10-year US Treasuries got away at that rate. Did Trump crash the bond market? So 4.3% is basically what they were before this whole thing started. It dipped, and then they started to come back a bit when the trade war got really lively. So they're back at where they were a week ago. That is not the definition of crashing the bond market. Yes, it was trending in the wrong direction. It had originally shown promise, and it was trending in the wrong direction. So that's why Trump took the winnings off the table and went for the 10% rate rather than, perhaps pushing for a higher number, because he got enough of what he wanted. He isolated China. He got his 10%. That's enough winning. We're going to bank the win. The bond market was not crashed, and I can imagine there were certain commentators out there who probably, even as I film this, I'm filming this at 2 p.m. on Thursday. I can imagine they're going to be showing graphs of very zoomed in charts of the 10-year, on a space of like a couple of days or a week or a couple of weeks or something like that. If just zoom out on this stuff, the bond market, the Treasury market never got disorderly. The Treasury market never got to the point, at least yesterday, and we see how today is, the Treasury market never got to the point where the Fed had to step in and be, the buyer of last resort on these bonds, or at least the banks that are set up through the Fed in order to be the ultimate buyers of this. They were able to get the bonds away. Yes, they would have liked a bit lower, but they just had to pay what they were paying a few weeks ago. I mean, if that's your definition of crashing the bond market, frankly, you need to calm down, dear, is what I say about that. Okay, there was also something highlighted from the live chat, something along the lines of it's crazy that Greek bonds are now the same price as US bonds. Okay, so I mean, I'm not up to date on what Greek bonds are trading at, but let's say Greek bonds are trading at 4.3%. That probably sounds about right. The same as US. What is that crazy? Does that mean that Greek bonds are a better bet? First of all, you have to understand that, yes, there are and there aren't Greek bonds. In terms of payout, it's all backed by the European Central Bank, and so the risk-return profile on them is closer linked to the European Central Bank than it is to Greece as a whole. Nevertheless, the Greek banks are the issuer, and I guarantee you that when you look at the credit default swap on Greek bonds, that they are materially higher, somewhere in the region to 50 to 100% higher on Greek bonds. So don't look at the yield as a measure of whether a bond is risky or not. Look at the insurance that people take out on it, which is a credit default swap.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.